Voice leading is a great tool, but the strongest musical principle is probably melody. And that's also true when you're comping. Melody will tie things together and overrule voice leading just as it does when you're making a chord melody arrangement. I get asked a lot about how I think about the different extensions and alterations that are used when I'm comping. And in this video, I'll show you some examples of how I comp thinking of the melody and harmonizing at the same time. I think this approach is really similar to how you also play chord solos, but it's a very nice way to sort of tie everything together and make your comping a complete musical statement rather than just a bunch of chords next to each other. In this video, I'm gonna take a turnaround in the key of G major, so A minor 7, D7, G major, E7, and then I'm gonna give you some exercises so that you can play melodies with all of those chords, and I'm gonna give you some examples of some simple melodies that I wrote on that progression. So the first thing we need to do is just to have some exercises to be able to play melodies with these chords. And the first chord is A minor. In this exercise, I'm actually just playing the G major scale on the high E string, and then harmonizing that with A minor chords. And I'm only using drop 2 chords in this lesson, and that's because if you know your drop 2 inversions, then you already have most of the notes covered. And if you want to change a melody note on a drop 2 voicing, then they're quite flexible for that, so they're easy to use for this. The only chord voicing that really needs any explanation in the A minor set is probably this one, which is an A minor 13. The F sharp is a melody note that you probably won't be using that much when you're trying to comp a 2-5-1 in the key of G, because the whole point of the A minor is actually to delay the F sharp for the D7. But just to have it in there, I just put it in like this, which is an okay voicing to use, but chances are you won't be using it that much. Let's go to the D7 voicings. The D7 voicings don't really ask for much of an explanation. What I'm using for the D7 is these F sharp half diminished voicings, because that gives us a D7 with a 9. If you want to check more out on how to add extensions to drop 2 voicings and how that works, then you can check out some of my drop 2 lessons. I have 3 of them, and they cover this quite thoroughly. So the only thing that probably needs a little bit of explanation is that I have the second chord is this, which is actually an A minor chord. The reason why I'm using this is because when we have the G in the melody, then it's better to change the chord to a sus chord. So essentially this is just a D7 sus with a 9, and that's a better option than having this interval in your chord. The G major 7 voicings sound like this. So there are 2 places that I need to explain a little bit here, and the first one is when we have the root in the melody. When you have the root in the melody, you don't necessarily want to have the major 7th under it, because then again you get this sound. And since we're probably going to be playing sort of really slow melodies with sustained chords, then it's probably better to do something about that. And what I did was that I changed the 7th year into a 6. So this is actually a G6 voicing. That's a very common thing to do when you come across a major 7 chord with the root in the melody, that you change the major 7 into a 6. And then for the rest, when we come up to the melody note C, this is a similar thing, because the C melody note doesn't actually sound nice on a G major 7. If I play a G major 7 with a C in the melody, it sounds like this. So it's better to just change the chord again, like we did with the D7. And what I changed to here is actually an A minor 7, because that's just sort of a diatonic passing chord that we can put in there. You will probably not have to sort of comp a G major 7 with a C in the melody for any sort of longer period of time, so it's always going to be a passing chord and that a passing note, and therefore you can also just use a passing chord, which is sort of the idea why I'm using the A minor 7. The last chord is an E7, and of course there is no real E7 in G major, but the point of the E7 is to take us back to A minor, so the scale that we would use on it is an A harmonic minor scale, and that would be this. So all the G7 voicings are sort of based on this diminished type voicing, which gives us an E7 with a flat 9. And I think the only one that really needs any mention is when we have A in the melody. So again, when we have A in the melody, it's going to clash with the third, so I change the chord into a sus chord. And in this case, that actually turns it into an E7 sus4 flat 9, which you can also think of as being B half diminished with an E in the bass. So now we have the chord voicing so that we can play some melodies through the progression. The first example of that sounds like this. The kind of melody you want to use for something like this is probably going to be mostly stepwise, or maybe using the occasional third. And there's not going to be a lot of movement, because the point of this is that it has to sit behind somebody playing a solo or somebody playing the theme, and it shouldn't take all the attention. So when you practice this, you want to make some small melodies that have 1 or 2 notes per bar or 1 note per chord, and work on it like that. That's going to make the most sense. And that's also going to help you develop something that you can actually use when you're comping. And that's what I'm doing here. So I'm using 2 notes per chord. The first one is just using this melody, so and that's then harmonized with A minor, F sharp half diminished, which is D7, and then G major, and then the E7, which is just 2 dim voicings. The next example sounds like this. So here's a good example of how you can use a motif when you're doing this. So the motif is essentially just moving stepwise up the scale. So, and then the same thing up here, and then a variation where we're moving down. And on the A minor 7, that's fairly obvious that it's just, and the D7 is also quite simple. Here you can also tell that I can easily, because I'm using this sort of melodic idea, I can easily skip up to the G major 7 up here without having to worry about the voice leading. And then this variation with the E7 kind of fits with the voice leading as well, so that doesn't really matter, and then resolves to this A minor 7 with a 9. But of course you can also use chromatic passing notes in your melodies, and most of the time they're going to end up as passing chords or as alterations, and that's what's happening in the last example. So in this example, the melody that I'm playing is this, so. And that's then harmonized with A minor voicings, fairly straightforward, D7 voicing, and then we get the passing note, which is this E flat, and that's just harmonized with a D7 altered voicing, then up to G6. And then we get this E7 altered. That's then resolved to this A minor with a 9. That was 3 examples of how I might apply this to a turnaround in the key of G. I think that if you want to work on this, then you probably want to try it just on the turnaround first, and then quickly move it to an entire standard, and maybe do it so that you play first 1 note per chord, so whole notes first, and then move it to half notes. And once you've done that a few times, then try and apply it to a real playing situation where you can change the rhythm as well. I think that's going to help get that kind of thinking into your playing. If you want to download a PDF of the examples and exercises I went over in this video, then go to the article on my website. There's a PDF download in that. And there you can of course also subscribe to my newsletter. And if you do that, you will get a free ebook with 15 2-5-1 licks with some altered dominance and some other interesting melodic ideas. If you have any questions or suggestions for my videos, then leave a comment on this video or connect with me on social media. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, Google+, Instagram. So there are a lot of places you can reach out to me, and it's always nice to get some feedback from you guys. If you want to check out some of this stuff that I went over in this lesson a little bit further, then you could also consider signing up for supporting me on Patreon. If you do that, then it's not the lowest tier, I think it's the second lowest tier already. You get some of the extra information that's connected to these lessons. And with this lesson, that's going to be how to comp through Ladybird, a whole chorus of Ladybird, using this principle. But you can check that out on Patreon. That's about it for this week. Thank you for watching, and until next week.